achieved.
Usually I use my opening segment to rant about something, but quite honestly, I think it's more important to recognize the Michael Bisping. Michael Bisping, of course, former UFC middleweight champion, Ultimate Fighter winner, most successful British fighter of all time, recently announcing his retirement. I believe it was today or yesterday. Either way, the guy, a lot of people didn't like him, a lot of people criticized him. I was a huge fan. I wasn't always a fan, but I slowly became a fan, and I found myself rooting for him, even when I picked against him. For example, when he fought Anderson Silva, and I needed Anderson Silva to win to cash a couple bets and to have an okay night, I found myself more and more saying, I want to see Michael Bisping win this fight. It's a huge fight, huge opportunity for him, and I want to see him win this fight. A lot of people criticized him for being a pillow-fisted, non-knockout artist despite the numbers he put up. A lot of people criticized him for his lack of top-level fights. But you know what? He was the type of guy that every time he came to the cage, you knew exactly what you were going to get. He was a fighter, win, lose, or draw. He was in there to fight. He talked a good game ahead of the fight. He always beefed it up. He was gracious in victory. He was gracious in defeat, and I enjoyed it. Of course, he did a couple controversial things, here and there, but a lot of fighters have at the heat of the moment. And I really like the fact that, he was the type of guy who always wanted a shot, never got a shot, and then boom, he takes a fight against Luke Rockhold on short notice for the title. A guy that submitted him and beat him up in relatively easy fashion, and he goes and knocks him out and wins the title. And then he takes on a Dan Henderson, a guy that knocked him out in highlight reel fashion, and was a highlight we'll see for the rest of his life and will always haunt him. And he beats him in a very grueling, and a lot of people would say he didn't win that fight, but still was a good matchup. He wins that fight. And then he goes and takes on George St. Pierre, a guy who, it was a fight that Bisping probably could have said, no, why am I fighting this guy? It was a good fight for him. He was injured. They talked about that. And, I felt bad that he lost the title in that matchup, but nonetheless, it was a big fight for him. Losing and going out with the Kelvin Gastelum loss was difficult, but again, he says his good eye is starting to bother him, and I really look forward to seeing him for a prolonged, long period of time working on the shows. I like listening to his breakdowns. He throws the odd barb in there, which always makes it entertaining and fun. And just generally speaking, I think he's a pretty good dude, and he's good for the sport. Now, welcome back to Kamikaze Overdrive MMA Predictions. As always, I am your host, Scott Johnson, and in this episode of the show, we are breaking down the upcoming UFC Fight Night 131, which will take place live in Utica, New York, and that's on June 1st, which is a Friday. Which it's, hey, fuck you, UFC. You throw me a Sunday event and you follow it with a Friday event. It really condenses my week, so I'm trying to get things done as quickly as possible. You'll probably notice my preliminary breakdowns are very brief and very short, directly to the point, probably just an intro, a physical comparison, and here's how the fight, I think, is going to go. I'm coming off a not-so-great show. It was preceded by two very, very good shows, two very highly producing shows. The bet packs are still available. The last show just didn't work out as well. The bet packs are still available. I'm hoping to produce again this show. I like my picks. I'm very excited about them. And yeah, it's good. If you're a fan of Twitter, follow me on there at KO_predictions. Again, I promote my stuff. I try to pipe in as much as I possibly can. But things seem to just be very busy right now. It's very difficult for me to get going. But a lot of good stuff coming, a lot of good fights. Very much looking forward to this card. It looks like a really fun card. And, on that note, let's get to that first main card prediction. The opening fight of the main card takes place in the UFC's light heavyweight division as the 15th ranked Gian Villante, 16-9-0, takes on former middleweight Smilin' Sam Alvey, currently holding a record of 32 wins, 10 losses, and 1 no contest. Now, Villante is coming off a split decision win over Francimir Barroso. He lost a split versus Patrick Cummings one fight before that, and he had a TKO loss to Shogun, who he has struggled to find consistency in the UFC despite having some pretty solid tools to work with and being a fairly good athlete. For Alvey, he moved up to light heavyweight and promptly KO'd Marcin Prachnau in his debut. He took a split decision win over Rashad Evans at middleweight. He also had losses to Ramazan Emiev and Talis Laitis in split in amongst those fights, so he's been a little hit or miss of late. Physically, Villante 1 inch taller, with a 1 inch reach advantage. Alvey is the younger man by a year. And as we said, Alvey is a former middleweight coming up, and Villante started his career competing at heavyweight and has since moved down to light heavyweight. Now, Alvey has, overall, you look at the big numbers here. Both guys have big knockout numbers. 10 of 16 wins by knockout for Villante, 19 of 32 wins by knockout for Sam Alvey. Alvey has been finished once by knockout, was against Derek Brunson. Villante has been finished 4 times by knockout. One of them came via injury, one of them came at heavyweight. So that's worth noting. The Tom Lawler one was a freak one because Villante was looking very good before Lawler caught him and knocked him cold. Now, when you look at these two, how that stacks up, Alvey, I would say, has the better chin, and his cardio is probably slightly better than Villante's, as Villante is known to slow down in fights, and we've seen it cost him fights in second halves because he just can't keep his pace up. But Sam Alvey likes to counter-strike. He likes to sit back, wait on his opponent to press forward, and this can lead to him scoring knockouts. It absolutely can. We saw in his last fight, he hurt his opponent, and then he rushed forward like a very green fighter with his hands down and basically walked into the knockout. One of the most foolish knockout defeats you'll see in a long time. But we have seen him, when you go back to the Cesar Fajeda was pushing forward. Alvey didn't have to land much, but he did put him down. Now, on the flip side of things, Alvey can be too passive, and it can lead to him getting outworked and dropping a decision. We saw that against Amiev, I can't say his name properly, Talis Leitas, Elias Theodoro. These guys outworked him and won decisions as a result of it. Villante, I would say, is the more diversified striker. He's got a decent jab. I really like the use of his kicks. He does a very nice job of chewing up his opponent's lower half. We saw that most evidently in his win over Corey Anderson. He'll go to the body, he'll go high as well, but those low kicks are crucial. Alvey, it's worth noting, 4 of his 5 UFC knockouts have come in the first round, and what happens, and I've seen a lot of it, is that fighters seem to get onto his cadence. He starts to slow down a little bit, and it's a combination of the two, and he struggles landing that knockout blow in longer fights. For Villante, he's a strong starter, but he has been known to fade if he's pushed. And he doesn't have the greatest record in decisions, and if guys can really push him and make him work hard, he's not going to finish strong. Alvey, though, doesn't have that type of style. It's going to push him. Again, being a counter-striker, it's going to allow Villante to fight at a pace that he's comfortable with. It's going to allow Villante to engage at a pace that he feels he can maintain over 3 rounds. On the flip side, Villante can be drawn into brawls. We've seen him against lesser opponents. Savarov was one of them, where Villante was winning, busting him up, hurting him, and then he got tagged a couple times, and he was in serious trouble as well. And if Alvey can do this, he could capitalize, land a counter, and put him down. Alvey's takedown defense and lack of interest overall in takedowns from Villante should keep this fight standing for the most part. Ultimately, I think if Alvey can't land that knockout, he's going to struggle here. Villante uses his jab and his kicks to outpoint Alvey. He'll probably use his size to grind Sam into the cage, and Sam has been known, he's a good takedown defense, but a bigger, stronger man leaning against him on the cage could really take away some of his pep. And if Sam slows down a little bit, he's not going to have nearly as much pop on his strikes and becomes far less effective in rounds 2 and 3. So my prediction is Gian Villante to defeat Sam Alvey by decision. Fight number 2 in the main card takes place in the UFC's featherweight division. It's a very interesting matchup as New York native Julio Arce, 14 wins and 2 losses, takes on Sweden's Daniel Kid Dynamite Teymur, who is 6-1. This is not to be confused with David Teymur, his brother, who's actually had more success in the UFC, but is surprisingly fighting on the prelims, probably having to do with the fact they're trying to showcase the local fighter in Arce. Now, again, it's probably worth noting Daniel David fighting on the same card. I can't remember. I don't think they've done that in the UFC. They've probably done that younger. Could it be a distraction? Could you have, especially if David fighting earlier gets defeated, could that throw Daniel off? We've heard about that. I think it was the Diaz brothers. No, it was the Pettises who had issues with that. So it's certainly worth noting there. Teymur lost his debut against Danny Henry. It was a fight he started very strong in, but ultimately faded and lost a decision. For Arce, he won his debut over Dan Ing. He has won 6 in a row, and again, he's from New York, so he certainly will be the home crown favorite here. Arce is 2 inches taller, of a 1-inch reach advantage, and he is 1 year younger. He's also a former bantamweight, which is interesting, feeling more comfortable here fighting at 145 pounds. Well, Henry actually fought at lightweight in his debut. Now, Arce, he comes from a Golden Gloves background. He has 3 wins by knockout, 4 wins by submission, so he can go to the ground if needed, but predominantly he wants to keep the fight standing. Arce, he works well behind his jab. He'll then land some power strikes behind that. He did a good job in his last fight picking up the timing of his opponent and landing shots. He's patient when he strikes. He's got good takedown defense, and he does a good job of working his opponents over, attacking all areas of the body. For Teymur, he was super aggressive in his debut. He hurt his opponent early but couldn't finish and gassed out. That's what it came down to. He just couldn't keep his pace up. Maybe he got too excited. I don't know. He fought at close range to try and smother his opponent's offense. He has good power in his strikes, but again, as I said, he slowed down and dropped the last 2 rounds. Again, why did he slow down? UFC debut could have played a factor. Too much weight fighting at 155 pounds. He would push too hard early on. It's also worth noting he had never been out of the first round prior to that fight, and that's a big factor there. For guys, when they get dragged into rounds 2 and 3 when they're not used to it, you throw all the other complications into making a debut and all those other factors, it's going to cost him. It's going to cost his physical output, and it certainly did in that fight, and probably cost him the victory. And I would think the big thing is with that fight, you can't fix that overnight, I don't think. You can't take a career built on first-round finishes and then start going decision and become a cardio horse. You can't go from, being one to the other in 1 or 2 fights. So that's not something he's going to fix overnight. I can't and still be successful. He could, but it's not that likely, I wouldn't think. Arce could look to use his grappling here to take Teymur down, out and take him out of his comfort zone. That's certainly a possibility. If he puts on the ground, he could look for a submission, or at least grind him out. Again, maybe test that cardio. Again, but unless Teymur has improved his cardio, he's going to struggle to find success beyond round 1. Arce is a more composed fighter. He's a more accurate striker. His style is built to go longer into fights, and he's simply more diverse, I think, with the grappling potential there. So my prediction is Julio Arce to defeat Daniel Teymur by decision. Our third fight of the night takes place in the UFC's welterweight division in a battle of veteran fighters as Jake the Juggernaut Ellenberger, 31-13-0, takes on Killa B, Ben Saunders, with a current record of 21 wins, 9 losses, and 2 draws. Now, as I said, this is a battle of 2 veterans trying to stay in the big show. Saunders has more recent wins to justify him being in the promotion, but Ellenberger has been facing far superior competition overall. Ellenberger has just 2 victories over his last 9 appearances, but you look at the guys he's lost to: Rory McDonald, the current, Rory McDonald, Lawler, Gastelum, Thompson, Tarek Safadine, Jorge Masvidal, Mike Perry, and again, you look at the credentials of these guys: the current Bellator welterweight champion, former Strikeforce champion, former UFC champion, multi-time title challenger in Thompson, former number 1 ranked fighter, Gastelum, who could be fighting for the middleweight title soon, and then Masvidal and Perry are incredibly solid fighters that are very difficult to get past. So Ellenberger has been fighting a who's who of welterweight talent. For Saunders, he has lost 2 consecutive fights after winning back-to-back bouts. He's 5-3 over his last 8 matchups, and his biggest win in that span, a Court McGee decision that was questionable. And he has been finished in all 3 of his recent defeats. Physically, Saunders 5-inch taller. He'll have a 6-inch reach advantage over Jake. Ellenberger is the younger man by 2 years, and Jake, it's worth noting, he has been out of action for just over a year. Now, as I said, Jake has been fighting exceptionally good competition and losing, which has many feeling he's over the hill, he's done. But keep in mind, he just turned 33 earlier this year, and he's shown he can still beat mid-tier guys, taking out Josh Koscheck, more recently taking out Matt Brown in very impressive fashion, and he's held his own in other fights at times. For Saunders, he's been edging out wins over relatively middling to low-level competition, or getting blasted and busted up by decent fighters. I would say overall Saunders has the clear edge in grappling. His submission game is very strong, especially off his back, but I think Ellenberger is by far the better wrestler. Saunders doesn't have the takedown game, and Ellenberger, if he wants to, will keep this fight vertical. He could look at take Saunders down and use his ground and pound, but again, it puts Saunders in a position to use one of his better skills, so I would imagine Jake opts to stay vertical. I would give Ellenberger the power edge, and despite his recent KO issues, I would say overall he's the more durable fighter. He's been knocked out by some sizable flamethrowers, but Saunders has been busted up as well and hurt in a lot of fights. Both guys actually get hit more than they hit their opponents, which is certainly more concerning for Saunders because those numbers have piled up in fights that he's winning against lesser competition. He's not able to really get them out of there with a high level of offense. He's got some finishes, but again, Ellenberger's numbers have come against high-level competition. When he wins, fairly definitively. When you look at his last 2 wins for Saunders, when he fought Court McGee, McGee actually landed more strikes than him overall. And when he fought Kenny Robertson, Robertson's not a huge high-volume striker, and Robertson landed 91 significant strikes. Saunders landed about 98, I believe. But still, it's getting hit a lot by a guy who's a wrestler. Ellenberger showed in the Brown fight that he can still crack, especially that body shot that really hurt him and eventually finishing him off. That was very impressive. And when you look at Saunders, he took a massive beating in the Allen Joban fight before the fight finished, and that was just 4 months ago. And he suffered 3 knockout losses over his last 8 fights. That's a lot. He's starting to build up. I think overall Ben has to get this fight in the clinch to have a lot of success, and he's going to struggle to do that against the lower stature and speed of Ellenberger. Jake will be the faster, more fleet-of-foot individual. Ben tends to throw too many right-side strikes. Again, if they land, fantastic, but again, it makes him predictable. I think Jake's going to be able to defend and counter. I think he's going to be the more fluid striker overall. And again, he looked good against Mike Perry, who was a little bit predictable. I think he'll have similar success here. I don't see Saunders as a one-punch knockout threat, like some of the other guys that have taken out Jake. And I don't think he's going to be able to land enough strikes for that death by accumulation situation. Watch for Ellenberger to land counter strikes and that body kick against that elongated midsection of Saunders. And he'll also do some damage to the legs of Saunders and really slow him down. And I think Ben's getting past it at this point. And my prediction is Jake Ellenberger to defeat Ben Saunders by TKO. Skipping right along, we are in the UFC's heavyweight division. Again, the more and more I go over these fights, I'm looking forward to them. They might not be the most high-profile fights. The main event certainly is. But there's a lot of good quality fights in this card. So coming off a card that a lot of people look down upon, this is a good fight card for fight fans. It's not going to draw in the big names and big audiences of people or casual fans. But again, this is a good, very solid card. And I like this fight here. We're in the UFC's heavyweight division as the big ticket Walt Harris, 10 wins and 7 losses, takes on Daddy Longlegs Daniel Spitz with a current record of 6 wins and 1 defeat. Now, when you look at Walt Harris, the guy seems he's a monster of a man. He's a good athlete. He's got a lot of intangibles that go in his favor, and it just seems like recently he's been finding his stride and being more successful. He had a 3-1 run in which he lost a close split decision, finished a couple other opponents. Then he took that short notice fight against Fabricio Verdum, which he really cannot knock a guy. He stepped up and fought a former champion looking to make a name for himself. And it was really a win-win situation, I would think. I'm sure he got some extra money thrown on him. He got submitted there. And then then he lost that DQ against Godbeer, which was certainly concerning. And again, he could easily be 4-2 in his current span and be on the rise. But that second loss hurt, and it really wasn't a loss, I feel, as he barely touched him with that head kick, and the resulting DQ was kind of questionable. Now you got Spitz. He lost to Godbeer in his debut in a 3-round decision, which was a kind of a weak fight, and then he knocked out Anthony Hamilton by knockout under 20 seconds. So it's really two ends of the spectrum. Not a lot of issues with his debut, and then not enough information in his second fight to really build a solid opinion of him. And because of that, it's not shocking. He comes out and puts a performance together we can't really anticipate. Regardless, physically, again, two big heavyweights. Harris, 250 pounds. Spitz, 245. Spitz, 6'7". He'll be 2 inches taller than 6'5" Harris, and he'll have a 5-inch reach advantage. These are two very big men going to war here. Now Harris, he has won all 10 of his fights by knockout, 9 in the first round. He has 1 in the second round, which was his win over Chase Sherman, which probably one of his best performances overall. He has 1-4 outside of round 1. Again, that one win being the Sherman knockout. But he looked good against Shamil Abdurrahimov over a 15-minute fight, split decision. I had Abdurrahimov in that matchup. I felt Walt Harris could have been given the decision. It was a very close fight, and again, despite the loss, it was a good sign for a fighter who traditionally struggles outside of the first 5 minutes. Now for Spitz, again, in his debut, he slowed down significantly against Godbeer in the second half of the fight. And Godbeer is not known for being a cardio horse by any stretch of the imagination. So for Spitz to lose that fight because his cardio was worse is certainly a concern. And again, a lot of people look at that and say, well, was it, his fact it was his debut? That could be an issue. But it's worth noting that of his 6 career wins, 5 have been in round 1, including that 24-second knockout of Hamilton. So he's not exactly a fighter who's known for going deep into bouts and really digging down and pulling out victories. The knockout of Hamilton, again, like I said, a lot of people look at that and go, oh, fantastic. It's like, what did he prove? He knocked out a guy with pretty much no chin in 24 seconds. That doesn't do much to change my opinion of his first fight. And again, my opinion of his first fight is kind of it's not really a strong opinion, again, based on the fact that it was a debut. I can't remember if it was short notice or not off the top of my head. Either way, we got a lot to worry about here. Now, when you look at how they actually match up in the cage, it's going to be Harris's power strikes versus Spitz, who tends to throw more half power, looking for volume and to do damage with guys. Again, he knocked out Hamilton, but again, you have to take that with a grain of salt, simply knowing Hamilton's chin's not awesome. Over 3 rounds, though, he only landed 51 strikes against Godbeer, who slowed down significantly. Godbeer landed 92, so that's not a good exchange rate, especially in the heavyweight division. Both guys have looked for takedowns on a few occasions, but nothing significant, overwhelming that suggests we're going to see a takedown-based fight here, wrestling-based fight. I would say Spitz's best chance to win this is to use his reach, keep Harris on the outside, and drag him into rounds 2 and 3. But again, I'm not sure if he has the cardio to do it. And again, that would be a fighter stepping out of his comfort zone to win a fight. And if that's the case, and that's something that we're looking at, it's difficult to back him in that scenario. I would say overall, Harris is the better athlete. He's quicker, he hits harder, and he should be able to target that chin of the taller Spitz. And when you get a guy who's tall, it puts your head up there on a pole and says, knock me off, please. And Harris is certainly capable of that. We saw him do that against Chase Sherman, who's also a fairly tall fighter. And my prediction here is Walt Harris to defeat Daniel Spitz by knockout. In the co-main event of the evening, another fun, under-the-radar type fight as Gregor the Gift Gillespie, undefeated 11-0, takes on Vinc from hell Pichel with a current record of 11 wins and 1 loss. So 22 combined victories, 1 combined loss. Very, very impressive. Gillespie coming in 4-0 in the UFC, 3 straight finishes. As I said, he's undefeated overall. And his last 3 UFC opponents, though, a combined record of 4-7 inside the octagon. So he's beat some guys that have had some wins, but again, not overwhelming competition. For Pichel, he has won 4 straight fights, quietly putting that streak together. Now, the reason it's been so quiet is 2 of those wins came back in 2014. He had one in 2017, one in 2018. He lost his debut against Rustam Havilov in that ridiculous Suplex City type scenario. But again, 4 straight wins, nothing to sneeze at. And when you look at the 4 fighters he's beaten, they have a combined record of 8-13. So a very similar situation where more losses than wins, but at least they've been able to pick up victories at this level. Physically, Pichel, 1 inch taller. He'll have a 1 inch reach advantage. He is 4 years older than Gillespie, and this is the first time Pichel has fought twice in a year since back in 2014. So again, he's struggled with activity. Probably a good thing for him to start picking up the pace and getting involved if he's going to make any type of run. Now for Gillespie, we know he's a talented NCAA Division I wrestler. 10 takedowns over his 4 UFC fights. Only 1 in his 2 first-round finishes. And he's never... So that's worth noting that in fights that go longer, he'll go to his wrestling. He hasn't had to in 2 fights. Those numbers could be drastic, could be much higher. He's also never been taken down. Again, I didn't get a chance to see if anybody's actually tried to take him down. But again, never been taken down. And you have to assume his takedown defense is probably pretty solid. Probably, you know, not perfect, but it's probably right there. For Pichel, he landed 8 takedowns in each of his first 2 UFC fights, so 16 combined. He attempted none in his win of Navian Brown. He knocked him out. He went 1 for 4 in his last fight. So again, he's a guy who will go to his wrestling if needed. He did stop Brown, but mainly he's been winning fights with his volume. And one of the things, though, when you look at his fights, they've been very close, and at times he relies on his opponent not to be the aggressor. And that magnifies the significance of his offense and his output. So it's worth noting that he's not really blowing guys out of the barn. He's just working consistently and winning fights because they're just not doing quite enough. His success overall, though, again, it's from pressure, moving forward with hard single strikes, or he'll throw the odd 2-punch combination. At the same time, he tends to lunge forward into his strikes, and he's not that accurate at times, but he keeps busy. But when he lunges forward with strikes and he's throwing strikes that aren't accurate and don't have purpose sometimes, it opens him to counter strikes and opens him up to being taken down. And that second one is huge. For Gillespie, he throws very hard strike. His striking is improving significantly. It's compact, which I really like. And again, we haven't seen him strike over 3 rounds. Can he maintain that quality of striking over 3 rounds? I don't know. We don't know. But certainly what I've seen him from late, I've been impressed with. When he fought Rinaldi in his most recent victory, he caught a knee strike and looked for a single leg takedown. He didn't get it, but he quickly got the second one. And what he showed was that good timing on the duck under and the ability to see his opponent attacking, recognize the technique coming, and capitalize on it. And that's something with a guy like Pichel who's going to lean into offense and overextend himself when being aggressive. It's going to open up for Gillespie to make similar level changes. Once he gets the fight to the ground, look out. He's a smothering top game. He's very good at maintaining that body-on-body pressure. But at the same time, he's good at advancing position. He mounted Rinaldi on multiple occasions. And he rolled with him and kept on top of him. He likes to keep position and really keep and work towards the dominant position. He landed some hard knee strikes, some good strikes overall, and eventually worked a back position where he landed that ground and pound to get the stoppage. And in that situation, the strikes he threw from that position were damaging and would be seen as what led to the finish, but it actually wasn't. What led to the finish was his control. His positional control was just as devastating, if not more. Rinaldi was in a position where he had no way out, and because the clock, it was close to the end of the round, that showed how devastating it was, how stuck he was. It's just he was stuck on his belly with a very heavy guy on his back, heavy both because of technique, dropping big shots, and the referee had to step in. Rinaldi had nowhere to go. And that, you look at that, and it's very similar to Derek Lewis, the type of guy who, if he gets on top of you, his ground and pound is devastating, but it's also the fact you can't defend against it. You can't get up from it because it's just so overwhelming. With Gillespie, he uses position and technique, but it's, again, he's on top of your back. He's holding you in a position where you just can't get out of it. And you got to sit there and eat shots and hope the bell goes, or this guy wears himself out beating you up, and the referee doesn't stop the fight. That's a very interesting scenario there. Pichel, overall, he's not a big volume guy. He wins close decisions. In this fight, he's not going to win the wrestling exchanges, so he's not going to have those numbers to fall back on. It's either going to end in a tie because nobody gets takedowns, because Gillespie doesn't go for them, Pichel gets stuffed, or he's going to give up a few takedowns. Gillespie, he hits very hard, he's aggressive, and, you know, can he continue to do it without an early finish? That's something we'll find out if this fight goes deeper, but I think the combination of his aggression on the feet and takedowns will win Gillespie a decision or lead to a stoppage. I think ultimately Gillespie gets a takedown, works to that back mount position, controls, and hammers away, and my prediction is Gregor Gillespie to defeat Vinc Pichel by TKO. And now we move to the main event of the evening, and please, I'm hoping, with only a couple days to go, this fight does not get canceled, because I am absolutely looking forward to this matchup. We are in the UFC's bantamweight division as the number 4 ranked Jimmie El Terror Rivera, 21 wins and 1 loss, takes on the 5th ranked Marlon Magic Moraes, 20 wins, 5 losses, and 1 draw. Now, this is a huge fight, could put the winner in line for a title shot. Bantamweight division is awesome right now, we'll talk about that in a bit. This fight was actually rumored to be happening. There was a lot of issues when Moraes was back as the WSOF champion. And a lot of people thought Frankie Rivera would be a guy brought in. We know Frankie Rivera had a bit of a run on Ultimate, or tried to get in through the Ultimate Fighter into the UFC. But again, these are two guys that a lot of people were saying could match up somewhere outside of the UFC, and now we get to see them at a little bit further in their careers, probably a little more finished than they were before, and like finished in a good way, refined. Let's go with refined, matching up here. But as the bantamweight division is absolutely awesome right now. It's one of the best divisions. Anybody who doesn't like the smaller guys that fight, you got to watch this division. We got TJ versus Cody going down, and then working our way down the ranks, you got Dominic Cruz and Rafael Sunsao sitting there waiting for opportunities to fight for the title. And you got Rivera Moraes on the verge. And then you got a guy like John Lineker, and then further down, John Dodson, Aljamain Sterling, Pedro Munoz, and the division just continues to go. Rob Font, like Thomas Almeida. It's fantastic. So you got to really like what this division offers, and this fight is a cream of the crop type matchup. Now, and again, look at their numbers. Moraes had a 13-fight winning streak going into his debut against Rafael Sunsao. He got snapped in a split decision. He is 15-1 in his last 16 fights, including defending the WSOF title on 5 occasions. Again, he said that split decision loss against Rafael Sunsao, split decision win over against John Dodson, and he knocked out Aljamain Sterling cold. For Rivera, he has won 20 consecutive bouts. He is 5-0 in the UFC, a split decision win over against Pedro Munoz, and then decision victories over Yuri Alcantara, Uriah Faber, and Thomas Almeida. Again, those are 2 impressive resumes leading into this matchup. Physically, Moraes 2 inches taller, Rivera 1 inch reach. He is the younger man by a year, and he's been out of action for 11 months since the Almeida fight. So almost a year. So that's very interesting there. Now, the first big numbers that jump off the card, or jump off the stat sheet at me, Rivera 15-1 in decisions. That's crazy. He has won 14 consecutive fights to go to the scorecards. Only 6 finishes for his career, but he's found some finishes recently, including his debut against Marcus Brimage. He took him out. So again, he's the type of guy who could score a finish. He's hurt several guys, but at the same time, he's very good on the scorecards. For Moraes, 9 wins by knockout, 5 wins by submission. He has finished 6 of his last 8 victories, 4 of those coming by knockout. He's 6-1 on the scorecards, which isn't bad. 2 of those 6 victories have come by split decision, and that 1 loss was a split decision loss. So, both guys, again, very capable in a lot of different areas. Now, there's a lot of pressure in this fight. Not only are they fighting for a possible shot at the title and bragging rights, as these two have had some issues in the past, Rivera's fighting at home in New York. So that's worth noting right away. A lot of pressure fighting at home and headlining. This is his first big main event in the UFC, main event opportunity. For Moraes, it is as well. But it's worth noting he headlined 4 WSOF cards. Again, I know the World Series of Fighting isn't the UFC, but still, they were nationally televised bouts. His title fight, his belt was on the line as well. So again, he's been in the spotlight a little bit more than Rivera has. He's had a couple of co-main events as well, so certainly I think he's got a little more experience there. But again, does that matter? I don't know. Rivera did go 5 rounds once in 2010. He has lots of 3-round experience. Moraes has gone 5 rounds twice, once in 2014, once in 2015, and he's got decent experience in 3-rounders as well. But again, being a finish-heavy fighter, he's going to have some quicker fights. Statistically, the edge to Rivera in volume, landing almost 1.5 more strikes per minute, but he also gets hit about half a strike more per minute than Moraes does. When you look at Moraes first, he throws a nice variety of strikes. Good feints and fakes to draw his opponent's offense. He's got fast hands. He has a big overhand right he likes to throw in there. He's an excellent kicker. Hard leg kicks. We've seen him stop a couple of guys with leg kicks in the past. He'll go high. He has a nice counter switch kick that he'll mix in, and he'll work to the body as opponents move forward, which is a nice technique to have that really shuts down forward pressure, both stopping them in their tracks and making them think about their willingness to actually go forward and absorb that type of damage. Now, when he fought a Sunsao, he was getting cracked with a left hand at times, and he survived. But he also got dropped by a left hand from John Dodson early in that fight. It shows how tough he is, and he's not an easy out, but at the same time, an area of vulnerability is certainly there from the left side. I would like to see him be more aggressive at times. He had a bit of a drop-off in the middle round against the Sunsao that cost him. He had the tools to beat Dodson more definitively, and I don't think he did, even though Dodson's a tough guy to figure out. But I want to see him be a little bit more aggressive and push the issue. For Rivera, he's a good volume striker. His striking output, combined with some timely takedowns, has been the keys to his success in the UFC. He throws short, crisp strikes, 2 to 3 punch combinations. He will rip to the body. He's got a good uppercut, and he's got some pretty good leg kicks as well. His power tends to be in his right hand, but not always. He steps in and throws it very hard. Again, quick with his power. He covers a lot of ground when he's doing it, and he uses some head movement to set up his offense as well. When he fought Munoz, he hurt him early. He flurried Brimage and knocked him out. He hurt both those guys with his right hands. Now, against Almeida, he was using his right, and he knocked Almeida down the second time with his right hand, but the first time was a beautifully set up left hook that put him on his ass. And that was one of the strikes that was doing a lot of damage. He was showing the right and then coming with the left, and that's where Almeida was having trouble defending. And that's worth noting against Moraes, again, who's been hurt from the left side on a couple of occasions. Now, we do know Rivera can sit back and counter-strike. We've seen him do that effectively. And when he does counter-strike, or when he looks to be a reactive striker, he tends to punch in flurries. You land 1 or 2 strikes, and he comes back with 3 or 4. And again, he does it. He can be very effective with this way and can score more, even though his opponent's landing the initial strikes. He's doing more in the second half of the exchange. For Munoz, again, when he fought Munoz, he got tagged and hurt a couple of times. He's had times where he's been backed up in fights, but again, he's very durable. He took some big shots in the Almeida fight and kept coming. When Moraes fought Assunção and fought Dodson, they were very close fights. And both guys are counter-strikers. They're not going to push the issue and really do a number on you with volume. Rivera can counter, but he's much more aggressive than those two individuals. And additionally, Rivera rarely leaves himself open to getting countered himself. He's got good timing. Again, those feints and fakes make him unpredictable. And he keeps good pressure. You know, ultimately, when I look at this matchup, unless Moraes can knock him out, it's going to be hard for him to match Rivera over 5 rounds. I'm not saying it's not going to be a close fight, but I think Rivera will edge him out. Moraes is dangerous. He took the power from Dodson, which shows how much of a chin he has, but I think Rivera, again, is more active, but not over-aggressive. Watch for that left hand of Rivera to do some damage here, but my prediction is Jimmie Rivera to defeat Marlon Moraes by decision. So those are my 6 main card predictions for UFC Fight Night 131. All of my preliminary picks will be available at kamikazeoverdrive.net. As I previously mentioned, they will probably be very quick and to the point because I want to get the bet packs posted as well. This is a fun card, folks, all the way top to bottom. There's a lot of good quality matchups here. And you know, if you're debating on Friday night, I don't know if I want to check this card out. Again, you will become a fan of mixed martial arts, and you're going to see some guys you might not normally watch. And I think, again, you'll be impressed with the action you see. That main event's going to be fantastic. And honestly, I'm a huge fan of Moraes. I remember predicting him to beat Miguel Torres in WSOF in the first fight. A lot of people thought, what the fuck is this guy thinking? But I remember picking that one up. But again, looking forward to this card overall. Buy the bet packs if you're interested. Again, I can't win every show. And a lot of people claim to win every show, and that's because they don't take risks as I do. And of course, that's a more, probably, I'm going to put it out there. It's probably it's a smarter way to win. But at the same time, what I do when I win big. Can't guarantee it, but I do my best, and we're going to try for it again here. I love when people take shots at me online, talk about how there's so much better predictors, and people posting, where the fuck are your videos? Where the fuck are your fight predictions beforehand? It's easy to say after the fact, this is who I picked. This is I was on. I told you this guy was going to win. Great, because every other time you do it, you know, you're nowhere to be found on all your losses. You can only talk about your wins. You only talk about your wins. And again, I want people to look at my full body of work and what I bring to the table. I'm not always right, but again, I feel I do a good job of justifying my picks and explaining to you why I think this is going to happen. Even if it doesn't, you can see the logic in it. On that note, it's probably time to get out of here because it is fucking late. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Follow me on all my social media stuff, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care. Hi.